So in today's video, I'm going to show you how to go from a blank wall with one power outlet right here at the bottom to creating a simple and clean entertainment setup with no visible wires. Now the first thing I did was paint this back wall white. I'm for sure going to be adding some backlighting to the TV, and I know from experience that colors 100% look best when they're reflecting off a white surface. I'll eventually paint the entire room white, but for now I'll just be doing this one surface where everything will be set up. Next, I picked up a floating media console from Wayfair. The actual assembly process was pretty straightforward and the instructions were easy to follow, but the mounting proved to be challenging, which I'll go over later in this video. I would recommend though, if you have the space for it, to go bigger than what I went with. Since I want to have this centered, I still have to be able to open the door on the left, and 71 inches is about the max length I could go, but I think something in the 90-inch range would be ideal for what will be a 65-inch TV. And since I don't yet know where I want everything to be positioned, I'll put the media console on a couple paint cans and push it up against the wall to better visualize the end result. As far as the TV, I'll use some painter's tape to mark out the perimeter to where I think it might look best. This next part is tricky because TV mounts should be anchored to the studs, but in my scenario, if I were to do that, the TV wouldn't be centered to where I want it on the wall in terms of left and right placement. So what I ended up doing was to span some wooden boards across the wall that will then be attached to the studs. Then the wall mount can be secured at any place along those added sections instead of having to rely on the location of the studs. Moving on, it's time to tackle what's probably the most important part of having a cable-free setup, and that's adding an outlet up by the TV. And before working on anything electrical, make sure to cut power off at the breaker. I'll then be removing the old outlet by disconnecting the live, neutral, and ground wires. Now I immediately noticed that this is not your traditional size box. I'm in my basement and the cement foundation is a lot closer than what the usual depth of a 2x4 would be. This isn't a huge deal, but it will make for a slightly more challenging installation process compared to being able to use a regular size junction container. From here, I'll go up towards where the TV will be and mark out the perimeter of the box I'll be adding and then cutting it out with the drywall saw. Now that I have the opening, I can run my standard 14-2 NM cabling down to the bottom. And a lot of different ways you could get the wiring down, but a while back I picked up the Magnapole and that's been working out great. It's basically an extremely strong magnet that you can attach your wires to, which you can then guide down from the outside of the wall using the magnetic roller. Once we get things through, I'll show a close-up of the outlet. On one side you have your brass colored screws like you're seeing here. This is the side where your black live wires will get connected. On the other side you have your silver screws, and this is where the white neutral lines go. And the green screw at the bottom is where you'll connect the grounds. Next, I'll be stripping back the wires that we just ran down from above in order to get things prepped for hooking them up to the wall plug. I'll feed both sets of wires through the top of the box, and then we can finally start getting everything connected. I personally like the option of screwing these underneath a little plate like I'm doing here versus the hook around the screw option that the old style plug had. You can really crank down on these to get an extremely tight connection. With all the wires now connected, I can put the box back in place, which was previously secured to the cement foundation using some concrete screws that at some point someone would have had to use a masonry bit to drill. And if you have the space, definitely use a traditional size outlet box like you're seeing now. A lot of these are able to secure to the drywall, which is a lot easier than trying to secure these to the cement foundation, but I couldn't find this style in the shallow depth unit that I had to use. Now before moving on, I want to thank the sponsor of today's video, Aura. So this is me signing up for their free 14-day trial, and during this setup process, one of the many things they do is scan the internet for data brokers that have your personal information. These data brokers then make a fortune selling your information to spammers, scammers, and other entities that want to know more about you. Now, Aura was able to find 30 such instances of my personal information being in the hands of these companies. Then, with one click, Aura sends out a notice to have my information removed from their systems, which they are legally required to do when asked. Their all-in-one platform offers antivirus protection, credit monitoring, credit lock, financial transaction alerts, secure VPN, identity protection, parental controls, 24/7 US-based customer service, and much, much more. I'll leave a link in the description for you to start your own free 14-day trial, so please make sure to check them out. Thank you all so much, and now back to the video. Moving up to the top, this is a lot easier since I only have one set of wires to deal with. I'll get the live, neutral, and ground connected and put everything back together. In case you're wondering how I secured this into the hole since it's not butted up against a stud, I did use a masonry bit to drill small holes into the concrete foundation that I was able to screw the back of the box into. Now as for a TV, my old Vizio broke about a year ago, and ever since then I've been saving up for something new. I went back and forth between the LG C4 and the Sony Bravia 8, but after doing a bunch of research, I decided to go with Sony. Once I had everything unboxed, I started to get the mounting brackets installed, and this is when I realized I had already made a huge mistake. I assumed that the mounting hardware would be installed right in the center of the TV, however, it's located much more towards the bottom. Now, one of my many flaws is I don't think things through before I start on something, and this is a perfect example. This should have been the very first thing I did before doing anything on the wall, and at this point I knew the TV was going to be much higher on the wall than what I had planned out, and sure enough, once I had it up, it was a solid 6 or 7 inches higher than what I wanted. And I'll admit, the idea of taking everything down and essentially starting over was too much, so I thought instead I could just raise the media console higher so there'd be less of a gap. I even started screwing in the mounting brackets for the media console much higher, which meant the bottom outlet would be below the console instead of in it like I originally wanted. And after seeing how things looked, I realized I had the brackets spaced too close together, so I had to move them further out. Then somehow I snapped the head of a screw off and it was embedded in the wall. I had to dig out a big chunk of drywall to fit a pliers in there to get it pulled back out. So at least for me, almost every DIY project that I do has at least one of these moments that I'm currently experiencing right now. My wall is completely torn up, I'm tired, I'm annoyed at myself for not planning things out better, and I'm wondering why I even thought I should attempt to do this myself in the first place. I had officially hit rock bottom, and what you're looking at right now is a very defeated man. However, after some intense internal dialogue with myself and some Culvers, I took a deep breath and decided to forge on with my original plan, which meant I had to almost completely start over. I took the TV down, I removed the mount off the wall, I moved both sections of wood lower and re-screwed them into the studs. I then reattached the TV mount to the boards, and finally I put the TV back on the brackets. Despite my wall being completely torn up, this is more what I had in mind from a layout perspective, and I was glad I bit the bullet and redid everything. With the setup now coming together, it was time to cut out a spot for where my HDMI cables could run from the TV to the media console. I bought a couple wall plates off Amazon that are meant specifically for this type of thing. I measured out the sizes of the plate, cut a hole in the top as well as the bottom, which will be inside the media console. I ran some HDMI cables through using the same Magnapole system from before, and then put on the outer plates to give it a finished look. I then quickly caulked the baseboard since it had been a long time and they were definitely in need of some TLC. After that, I moved on to patching up all the holes in my wall, letting it dry, and giving it a fresh coat of paint. So I'm not sure if all floating media consoles are this much of a nightmare to install, but it was not easy and was probably the most time-consuming part of the project. If anyone has a different recommendation for one of these in which they had a pleasant mounting experience, please let me know. To be fair though, if I had the right tools it would have been much easier, but trying to attach the little screws from inside of the cubbies to the underside of the top piece was not easy doing it by hand since my drill didn't fit and I had minimal room to maneuver. Next I reattached the TV and tidied up the cables, and it was finally starting to look like a finished project. Now, if your house is like mine, you'll probably notice some gaps in between certain parts of the media console and the wall. Very rarely are walls perfectly flat, so you might see this as well. Instead of using some caulking for this, I used a thin white trim piece that I found on Amazon. I figured this would be less messy to take down if I ever wanted to change things up down the road. And finally, I drilled some small holes in the back of the media console using a Forstner bit to be able to run any wires from one cubby to the next and back to the power on the left-hand side. Now, I hinted at this in the beginning of the video, but the reason I went with all white is because I absolutely love ambilight setups. This is where you can install some lights around the back perimeter of the TV, and then those lights will automatically match and change with the colors on the screen, and once you've experienced this in person, I can almost promise you, you're going to be hooked. Fancy LEDs just released their brand new HDMI 2.1 kit that's currently the best option on the market for creating this type of immersion. After getting these installed, you can cut off any extra lights, connect the sync box to the TV, and then you can plug in up to 3 HDMI devices. I'll be connecting my PS5 and my Nvidia Shield, but it is compatible with anything HDMI, so if you have an Apple TV, Fire Stick, Chromecast, a PC, or anything else, it'll all work. And if you did want to see a much more detailed breakdown, I did a full-length review of this product that I definitely recommend checking out if interested. I did want to quickly mention that I just started a Patreon account, and I want to thank all my supporters who help contribute directly to the channel. Every little bit helps me get closer to my dream of being able to make videos full-time, and your support means the world to me. So again, thank you from the bottom of my heart, and I'm truly blown away by your generosity. So I don't want to spoil the final results, but despite the many challenges, in the end, it was all worth it, and I absolutely love how it turned out. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you enjoy the final pictures and videos.